Well, we finally got the answer that everyone had been clamoring for months. We got confirmation of exactly how long Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift were dating, were a couple before her first appearance at Arrowhead.
Yeah, buried in just a little article in Time magazine in which Taylor Swift was named Person of the Year. Pretty big deal. Shout out to Taylor for a much deserved honor. She's dominated every item of media, this podcast included. So pretty amazing for her. But this was, I believe, her first public comments on her relationship with Travis Kelce, other than changing the lyrics to Karma when she was down in Brazil.
Argentina.
That's right.
Argentina.
Well, she was also in Brazil, but she was in Argentina when she changed the lyrics.
She was. But
my South American geography is a little.
That's okay. It's not America. It's somewhere else. So therefore,
it
actually
we have
is
any
American,
Brazilian or Argentinian listeners,
which we do,
very offended, and
hola and or whatever hello in Portuguese.
Portuguese, right? Exactly.
Yes, I was about to say Brazilian, but I'm a little bit more cultured than that.
Sure, you are. You definitely know the official national language of Brazil, and it is Portuguese.
The detail that we're talking about is, of course, that she said that when Travis Kelce put her on a blast on the podcast for not being able to see him when he wanted to, that it was, quote, metal as hell, which is hilarious, and that she then reached out to him and began their conversations right around then, which was, the podcast was in the summer. That was right. July.
Yep.
That
Mid-July,
was certainly much earlier than the September appearance in Arrowhead. So, by the time she came to Arrowhead, she said in the magazine, we were a couple. Not that we were dating, not that we were hanging out or whatever. Like, they had considered themselves a couple at that time, which was fun and a cool detail that we had all kind of speculated about, but nobody really knew. So shout out to Travis for getting things started and keeping it going.
Yeah, and shout out to all the dads, Brads, and Chads in this podcast that are offended that we're starting off talking about Taylor Swift. Sorry, guys. Welcome in to It's Always Sunny in Cheese Kingdom. I'm Austin. Find me on Twitter /X at Real Bird Lawyer until the ship goes down on Blue Sky at Bird Law Expert. Whenever, we transition over to the bluer skies. Here with me, as always, my co-host Taylor at Taylor_Witt on Twitter /X, on Blue Sky at Taylor M. Witt. What's going on? Big week.
Yeah, big week. A lot of emotions to process with the team, a lot of things to talk about. It's also, of course, fantasy playoffs, as we'll talk about right around the corner. Mm-hmm. So just a lot of football emotions for those of us that pay attention to college football. A lot of that's going on right now with the jockeying for the bowl games and stuff. I know you don't care, but some of us do. It's fun. It's a fun time.
Yeah, I don't care about any of that, but I do care about fantasy football, and we're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you guys want to get into the action, there's still time left in the season to get into your best ball. Use our promo code SUNNY, SUNNY, to get a match deposit up to your first $100. And I care a lot about our listener fantasy league. So we got to give a quick shout out and update there as we head into the last week of the regular season in redraft. Roscoe and Z-Man are battling for the most points. That winner, whoever scores the most points, whoever's team has the most points at the end of the year, is going to be automatically promoted to our listener dynasty league. So Roscoe and Z-Man are 20 points apart. They are battling that out in week 14. Barring a major shakeup, we are going to have those two in the playoffs, plus Volk 50, Doughy Fresh, Duvy, and another manager who I've decided not to name on the podcast for fear of jinxing him or her. I'm not going to say who it is, but this person has been named on the podcast before, and it has always resulted in a downturn in his or her fortunes. And I don't want to put that on him or her. So good luck in the playoffs to everyone in our redraft league. Obviously, Roscoe or Z-Man's going to be earning that promotion to the Dynasty League, but some other lucky winner who wins the Super Bowl, or whoever's the runner-up, if the runner-up in points, if Roscoe or Z-Man, whoever gets the most points, wins the Super Bowl as well, will get promoted to our Dynasty League. We can't wait to welcome them in. Going to be amazing. In the Dynasty League, I've clinched a playoff spot. I still need one more win in the last week of the regular season to clinch that sweet, sweet first round bye, which would be just chef's kiss. I gotta rest my guys, right? Like I want to be able to, lord over the league for a week.
Sit back, relax.
I've
Yep.
been put on blast quite a bit by our friend Dennis in the league because of my
Kick-off.
point total, and I just want to say that our point totals are just fine. Thank you very much. There was a time where my team was in 10th in points, but was up there in record. No longer. My team is third in points scored. My team is good, and your team is second in points scored. How did that happen?
Well, because we know ball. That's how. It's funny that the Dynasty League, we are on opposite ends of the win-loss situation. You have the most wins in the league at 10-3, and I'm at 6-7. But because we've both scored now, second and third most in the league, I'm chilling. Even though I'm
Sure,
7, I could be fighting for that, final playoff spot if this were a normal non-ball knowing league that only rewarded based on win-loss records, which are insane and random and hard to really justify that you're the best team if you continually get good luck fortune on the head-to-head matchups. Anyways, so I'm doing great. I'm going to be probably that 5th seed slotted in as the first wild card. That's the way you and I like to play fantasy football, is with the wild cards for the points in the 5 and 6. And I think, as all of our friends in both leagues have found out, that is the way to go. That is the way that, please spread the word far and wide to all of your other leagues that you're in everywhere else. Like, this should be the way to go. You got to reward the top 4 based on record. You got to do the bottom 5 and 6 based on points, and everyone's happy. Nobody can bitch. If you don't fall into one of the top 4 in record or the next 2 highest point scores, you do not belong in the playoffs. Simple as that.
You don't deserve it. Exactly. And it's crazy that Sleeper, the app that we use for our leagues, doesn't even allow you to do that as a setting.
None of them do.
We just
Yahoo,
do it manually.
ESPN, none of them
it's
do.
Crazy that it all has to be done manually. That should be the default. We have wildcard teams in the NFL. We should have wildcard teams in fantasy football. In Saturday news, our friend Tojo has clinched relegation, more or less. I mean, I guess he could score 300 points in the last game of the season, but that's not going to happen. He will have to fight his way back up from the redraft ranks, but congratulations to him on a hard-fought season. He will be back, I am sure. And in our Cutthroat League, we're down to our final 4. Volk 50 eliminated. He is going to be in the playoffs in the redraft league, so he certainly has had a lot of success there, and he made it to the final 5.
We'll give Volk a because he has been a valiant fighter in both the leagues that he's in this year.
Yeah, we've had
he knows ball.
We have a few people that are in 2 of the leagues, either the redraft league plus the Cutthroat League or the Dynasty League plus the Cutthroat League, and it has been a pleasure to serve with all of you. The final 4: Dr. Weiss, Chief Justice,
it's Casey Drew. You've called him Doctor before, but it's Drew. Weiss or Weiss, one of the two.
It's Doctor. It's Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew Weiss. Dr. Drew Weiss.
Doctor. Congrats, Doc, on your PhD.
That's fine. And Chief Justin Justin Rorell, who rebranded because I kept saying his name wrong. So
Justin Rorell, that's right. Yeah.
We're just continuing the podcast.
He and the doctor can commiserate together.
Mispronouncing names. Congratulations to them, Casey Puerto Rican, and then of course myself. I am in the top 4. And I'm going for the number 1 seed in Dynasty. I'm in the final 4 in Cutthroat.
Yes.
And if I don't win at least one of those leagues, it's going to be a major, major, major disappointment.
I'm going to have to do a health check on you. Like, I'm going to have to come out to Denver and make sure that things are okay.
I'm braced for it. Braced for it. I know it's going to happen because fantasy football is pain. And it doesn't matter how much ball that I know, because at the end of the day, that's going to be irrelevant. But as you would expect, the 4 teams left in this league, because we've been eliminating everyone's players every week, it's now a 14 fantasy football league. So the rosters are insane. Everybody's projected to score 160 plus points.
Yeah.
It's going to be bananas.
And let me just point out for the listeners, because you will not toot your own horn here, but we are in, of course, some personal leagues that aren't in our listener leagues, and you are in the final 3 and guaranteed to move on to the final 2 in our personal 8-man Cutthroat League, the birthplace of our listener Cutthroat League, the original Cutthroat League, and your team is rolling there. And then, of course, we have a Dynasty League that's been going since 2019, and you are an absolute machine there with the number 1 seed. So, like, you've got 4 teams positioned that, with not too much time left in the year, are all looking like they're going to be challenging for the Super Bowl. So congrats to you. I am so sorry about your 0-4 upcoming playoff performance, but it's going to be brutal. Yeah, it is going to be brutal, but maybe you can sneak one out, and if you even pull one of the
Sure.
four, it's going to be a miraculous year. So hopefully
It'll
that
it'll
happens.
pay for all my buy-ins if I
Yeah,
hit one of them, and if I hit the dynasty one, that's a
it's a
big
big
hefty payout. That's a
either
big money
dynasty one,
league,
and you're in it on
either
both.
dynasty league, and I'm in on both of them. I got a chance in both. My personal dynasty roster is insane. I
As
have
stupid as
Tyreek, I
any
have
fantasy
AJ
football team's
Brown,
ever
I
been.
have Stephon Diggs, I have Josh
Josh Allen,
Allen,
yep.
I have Travis Etienne. I
DeAndre
have
Swift.
yeah. I mean, I'm
You
flexing
had Tank
Nico
Dell.
Collins this week. I had Debo last week who put up a
Mm-hmm.
30 burger for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Stacked.
good. It's a good
As
team.
stacked as it gets.
It's a very good. It's a very good squad, and I will be devastated if it doesn't win the Super Bowl. But let's get into this show. We've got news. We've got what is happening. We've got a recap of a loss, Chiefs and Packers on Sunday Night Football. Oof, tough one, but we'll get through it. And then we've got low key a huge matchup this weekend. Chiefs are going to be hosting the Buffalo Bills at Arrowhead on Sunday afternoon. So let's get into it. Let's start off, as always, with the injury situation. And boy, Sunday was an absolute bloodbath. The Chiefs, it was terrible. We will talk about this some more when we recap the show, or when we recap the game. But Isaiah Pacheco picked up a shoulder contusion. Donovan Smith missed time in this game with a neck stinger. He was in and out of the lineup. Drew Tranquil left in the first quarter with a concussion. He is in the concussion protocol. And Brian Cook's ankle, okay, bent further than an ankle should be able to bend without something in the ankle breaking in half. Somehow he escaped without any kind of fracture, and it's not going to be a season-ending injury. We don't have a timetable for how long he's going to be out. He's not on injured reserve yet. He obviously is not practicing this week. But, I mean, all things considered, all four of those guys did not practice today. But none of them have gone on injured reserve. And as far as we know, none of them are going to be season-ending injuries.
Yeah, for Cook, first of all, it was absolutely best case scenario for the news based on the gruesome ankle injury that we all saw. I'm sure some of you have seen the photo that's been going around of his foot literally on backwards, turned around. I mean, it was really bad. And for him to have not, broken the ankle, torn a ligament, done any of the stuff that would have required, about a year or so. I mean, 9 months or whatever.
Right.
Like definitely, especially at this point in the year, in December, if you get a really bad injury down there, that's going to set you through training camp. That's going to set you back. I mean, it's a sometimes a 2-season thing at the end of this one, and then all of next year before you get back to going. We all remember Juan Thornhill. I know it wasn't the ankle, but still a late season injury like that can really, really set you back. So good news for Cook so far. Now, who knows? Maybe it's the worst sprained ankle in the history of mankind, and it sure looked like it. So I mean, we'll see if he can make it back onto the field for the playoffs. That's a huge win for the Chiefs. And then, like you said, the other guys, they're the kind of bumps and bruises and injuries that can happen throughout the game, but none of them seem to be multi-week situations. And so we'll just see how everybody bounces back. I think obviously we'll talk about it a little bit more, but Drew Tranquil's the one I'm keeping my eye on the concussion protocol, because with Nick Bolton being on the mend, and that's good news that Nick Bolton's practicing and his practice window's open and all that stuff. But Drew Tranquil's the guy that I'm the most worried about moving forward as far as the success of the team goes.
Yeah, Tranquil in the concussion protocol did not practice. You mentioned Nick Bolton. Andy Reid says he is, quote, close to returning. So it's not clear whether that's going to be this week, although today was his first full practice since the injury. So, at the point where he's logging a full practice on a Wednesday, you got to think there's a very good chance for him to play this weekend.
Yeah.
Just kind of going through those other guys that didn't practice today. Donovan Smith, the neck stinger, sounds like it may keep him out of the lineup this week. Which is crazy because he was able to come back into the game, but looks like Wanya Morris might be getting the start at left tackle on Sunday. He said today that he was preparing to start and that the Chiefs essentially were treating it as his job for Sunday. So that'll be interesting. We obviously saw a couple of snaps from him 2 weeks ago when Donovan Smith was on the sidelines for a couple of plays with some injury concerns. And then this week got a few more snaps in there with Smith coming out of the lineup there. So it looks like he's going to maybe be getting the start on Sunday at left tackle.
Yeah, Morris is a really interesting. We did talk about him a little bit last week, but he logged 46 snaps this week, so he got in there when Donovan Smith couldn't go. And Donovan Smith's 30 and has been struggling. Not has been He hasn't been struggling in every aspect of the game. He hasn't been like a complete black hole out there, but he has certainly been had his fair share of penalties and all that stuff that we've talked about. So uh, I do think part of this is kind of the coaching staff being like, all right, Donovan, like, we'll go ahead and sit you down. You
Yeah,
got the neck thing, you're
take your
30, like,
time.
take your time if you want to, yeah, really, really massage that thing. So in the meantime, they're getting a crash course, a good look at Wanya Morris at left tackle. And if the rookie struggles and if he has, a lot of just really bad moments, then, they've got a veteran that's on the mend that they can at least lean on if the situation gets dire. But in the meantime, let's see what the young kid has, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be really interesting to see him, especially in the run game. It would be concerning if this were the Bills defense and the Donovan, or not Donovan, the Von Miller of a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
But it isn't. He's washed, and we'll see what happens on Sunday. But it'll be interesting to see him get a full week of first team reps and then go out there and do it on Sunday. Per friend of the pod, Charles Goldman. The Chiefs are hopeful that Isaiah Pacheco will be able to practice later in the week, so it sounds like he may be able to give it a go. His injury was obviously insane because it looked like when he came off, I mean, his leg, and he has a shoulder contusion, by the way. That's why he's not practicing. He also had a leg injury in this game where it looked like he got his leg all twisted around, and then
Ugh.
he came out for one play, and then the very next play, the broadcast staff said that he's one man brotherly shove. I mean, he literally was like
He
moving
was
the
awesome.
pile like 6 yards.
Yeah,
Like after one play, he was on the bench for one play. So
yeah.
hopefully he'll be able to go in this game as well. And we got a little mailbag question that we wanted to throw in here. We haven't done a dedicated mailbag episode. It gets busy during the season, but our guy original GMF asked us on
Pick up.
Discord to name our current defensive MVP on the team. And we threw it in the injury section because everybody on the defense got injured. I guess that's why we're addressing it here. But we're peppering the mailbag questions here.
We
So
we are. We're trying to
defensive
do it.
MVP.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a couple guys that have really kind of risen above the rest, and I think you have to start with Trent McDuffie. He has been not only the best cornerback on the team, but by some metrics and throughout the year, been labeled the best cornerback in the NFL. And so, anytime you have a shutdown corner like that, they obviously had a huge run on wide receiver ones. Snead was involved a lot in that, and Snead's had a great year. It's been a little penalty happy, but he's certainly covered very, very well. But Clamps McDuffie, what else can you say about him? All the fumble recoveries or fumble forced, I guess, that he's had, including the big one on Tyreek Hill. Probably had. I mean, that is the highlight of the year on both sides of the ball. That is the play that the Chiefs are looking back on right now is with the most excitement. So I would name him. I felt like Drew Tranquil, especially given that he stepped in for Nick Bolton when he went down and has played really, really well. Played his ass off. Always has a nose for the ball.
Graded linebackers in the NFL this year.
Exactly. Yeah, and getting him for a little amount from the Los Angeles Chargers to boot is a hilarious turn of events there. So definitely have to shout out Tranquil. I still think I'm voting McDuffie over him right now, but those guys are my 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's tough because I think you can make an argument for like 4 or 5 guys. I mean, you didn't mention anybody on the defensive line, and the defensive line has had obviously the best player on the defensive line is Chris Jones, but the most productive player in terms of the number of sacks and just the number of times he's gotten to the quarterback is George Karlaftis, and
he's been great.
He's been really good, but I feel like it's tough because I just feel like every level of the defense is playing so well, and the synergy is so good between those groups. This week's performance, with the rash of injuries notwithstanding, there were some rough moments in this game. Obviously, the Chiefs were down to a third string linebacker. We'll talk about that, but if I had to pick one guy, I think I probably would still pick Chris Jones, even though he's having a little bit of a down year, even though he's had games where he's been, for him, pretty invisible. Just because I still feel like he's it's kind of like when you're doing the real life MVP, like it's always a quarterback, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the most important position.
Yep.
Interior defensive lineman is not necessarily, but when it's Chris Jones, it is. And obviously, he's played a lot on the edge, and he's been incredible off the edge in clutch situations this year as an edge rusher. So I think that would probably be the way that I would lean. But it's like one of those things too, where it's hard to pick between the two cornerbacks. It's hard to,
Right.
pick between the linebackers. Obviously, Tranquil's been the MVP of that room, but everybody's been doing pretty well in that room. So, a gun to my head, I'd say Chris Jones, but
Sure.
I think there are strong arguments for like 4 or 5 guys, legitimately, which is a great situation to be in for the Chiefs.
What I've thought was interesting about Chris's season is that he started the year off with 5 straight games with a sack, and he had a half sack in there too. So he had 5.5 through his first 5 games. And I just thought, like, all right, well, good luck, NFL. The Chiefs won every single one of those games. The defense was looking dominant.
Chris is going to make his paycheck back.
Yeah, he's going to make the money. It was actually maybe a smart decision, blah, 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 blah. And then over his last 6 games, he had 2 sacks against the Eagles and no sacks in any of the other games. I know sacks are not the only stat to keep track of. I know he is the piston that makes the engine go, or whatever it was Spag said. Like, I get it. He commands double teams. He, is a big presence in there, but the sacks are the moneymaker plays. Those are the ones that shut down drives and all that stuff. And he clearly, after starting the year off, picking one up in every game for 5, I would like to see him maybe string a couple of those more together here on out. But yeah, still love Chris Jones, and am glad that things worked out and that he's been on the defense. He's still a monster.
In other news, this would be transaction news. Were there an actual transaction to have occurred yet? But there is not. Zach Ertz was released by the Arizona Cardinals, and they sort of just did him solid. He kind of said, "I don't want to be on the Cardinals anymore." He's a veteran, and so this is like the Terrell Suggs situation a couple of years ago, where he requested his release from who was he playing for before we picked him up.
So, obviously he had the long career with the Ravens,
right?
But I believe Suggs was was he a Steeler? I'll look him up while we're talking.
Yeah, maybe look that up while I'm talking. But in any case, it's a similar situation where you have, a veteran at the end of his career who says, "Listen, you're not a contender. We're not playing for anything. I'd like to go sign with another team."
It was Arizona.
Yeah. Amazing. Incredible.
Yeah.
So the Cardinals, literally the same team, did Zach Ertz the solid that they did for Terrell Suggs as well, granted him his release, and he is hoping to sign with a playoff team, a contender. The Chiefs are reportedly one of the teams that is very interested in his services for obvious reasons. Listen, the guy is not the player that he used to be, but he's somebody that can reliably catch football, and obviously has played not for Andy Reid, because he was drafted in 2013, which is the first year that Andy came over to Kansas City, but he's played for Doug Peterson. He presumably would be able to pick up the offense passably well pretty quickly. He's almost a 10-year, he's actually a 12-year vet now.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a guy that had 400 yards last year, 4 touchdowns, 187 this year. He's had some injury issues as well, but 406 yards last year in only 10 games for Arizona. And, the year before that, 760 yards, which for a tight end, 31-year-old tight end that isn't Travis Kelce,
right?
Really a pretty solid year. So it's pretty obvious why the Chiefs would have interest here. Remains to be seen whether they'll be able to seal the deal, because some of the other teams involved are the 49ers, the Philadelphia Eagles, his former team, and the Baltimore Ravens, who lost their tight end Mark Andrews for the year.
Yeah.
So,
and Philly's dealing with Goddard injuries too. So both of those
teams is going to be back this week, but still,
much more desperate to pick up a healthy tight end than someone like the Chiefs or the Niners are, who have Kelce and Kittle at least locked in as their TE1. So could be interesting to see if those other two teams want to throw some more money at Ertz, and kind of if they're playing a little bit more desperate. Than the Chiefs haven't thrown money at anybody in a long time. And they don't really bring in free agents that often on the offensive side of the ball at all. And so, it'll just be interesting how Ertz views this offense, how he views his role as the, I mean, Noah Gray's in there too, and he's had some moments. So, it's a loaded tight end room. If they want to do the three tight end stuff that they really like to do when Jody Fortson was out there, then, maybe they bring him in there for just that package of plays. And maybe he doesn't have a big workload, but could catch some red zone targets and stuff. I mean, it really does depend on how the Chiefs pitch the role to Ertz. I assume that would play a factor there. So we'll kind of see what his goals are. If his goals are to win a Super Bowl, he's got some great teams lined up between Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, and Philly. That's like picking the two best teams on both conferences, and we'll see which one I think is the most likely to be holding the trophy at the end.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's going to do it for news. Let's talk about
what is happening.
This is the segment where we talk about what's going on around the NFL and how it relates to the Chiefs and affects the Chiefs. And we can go ahead and take stock of the AFC playoff picture. We did it a couple of weeks ago. We skipped last week. We've got 5 games left to play. There were some major shakeups this week. So starting off with Baltimore and Miami atop the conference with 9-3 records. They're a game ahead of the Chiefs in the standings. But the Chiefs have the tiebreakers over both of these teams. They obviously won the head-to-head over Miami, which means they're locked in. They can't lose that tiebreaker. They won the head-to-head. They're 1-0 against Miami. If they finish with the same record, the Chiefs will be the higher-seeded team between the two of them. Baltimore is interesting because the Chiefs don't play Baltimore, but the first tiebreaker is conference record. And the Chiefs have one AFC loss. 3 of their 4 losses have been to NFC teams. Baltimore already has 3 AFC losses. So the Chiefs do have all 5 of their games remaining against AFC teams. If they blow a couple of those games to the point where they're now, tied with Baltimore for AFC losses, they're probably going to have a worse record than Baltimore.
Right.
So It's going to be really hard for them to blow the tiebreaker while also still having a better record than Baltimore. So really, at this point, you just need Baltimore to drop a game. They no longer control their own destiny, but those teams are only a game ahead. The Chiefs now are tied with the Jags with an 8-4 record. And that is notable because the Jags, of course, came into this week with an 8-3 record. They were going against Jake Browning on Monday Night Football. And the Cincinnati Bengals showed us once for all that Joe Burrow is a system quarterback because Jake Browning went out against a pretty good Jacksonville defense and dropped 34 points.
Yeah, he was and in impressive fashion. He started the game out like 19 of 21, I think it was, and was, I mean, when those weapons are out there and when you're throwing to Jamar Chase, who had a 76-yard touchdown in this one and was just, he went nuts. He had 149 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, the job's pretty easy. But Jake Browning for the game, 32 of 37, 354 yards and that long touchdown to Jamar Chase. And then, obviously everybody saw the Trevor Lawrence injury and that he, got his ankle stepped on by a guard and then fallen on the same play. He did come out today. I thought this was interesting and said that he refused the cart. They offered the cart, but it was like behind some equipment and it was going to take a little bit to get to him. And he saw the tunnel next to him and was just like, I'm just going to go down the tunnel. We're fine. Don't worry about it. And then he said, once I started walking down that tunnel, I was like, man, this is kind of a long walk. And of course, the Monday Night Football cameras caught 2 staffers under his arms, limping along really slowly down the tunnel. And everyone was screaming, including me, for the cart. What are you doing with your franchise quarterback, making him walk on cleats on the concrete when he just but anyway, he did come out today and say like, yeah. They said we can bring the cart. And I said, no, but that's a big deal. That's a big loss, both in the game against a team that doesn't have their quarterback. And then just big picture wise, if Trevor Lawrence has to miss this week against the Browns, and the Browns, of course, dropped a game this week, so they're not really up, where they were in the standings. And then if they could go beat the Jags and CJ Beathard, and I mean, the AFC is insane right now with the backup quarterbacks. 4 of the 7 teams that are slotted as current AFC playoff teams have backup quarterbacks this week. It's been wild, and obviously they've been dropping like flies. We got to hope that trend probably stops here soon.
Yeah, I mean, he's diagnosed with a high ankle sprain. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes against the Jaguars in the playoffs had the high ankle sprain. Patrick also refused the cart and just sprinted down the tunnel to the locker room.
And then came out and beat the Jags.
And then came out and beat the Jags in the second half, also without the cart. And, he was moving. He didn't have anybody anybody coddling him or supporting him back to the locker room. I'm sure Trevor Lawrence is a tough guy, but it sounds like it's going to be a struggle for him to play this week. And even one game against a team like the Browns that's jockeying for playoff position also could be pretty big, because the Jags are now only one game ahead of two other teams that are right on the cusp of playoff contention. There are 4 7-5 teams. Obviously, only 3 of those teams can get in as wild cards. But those teams currently are the Steelers, the Browns, the Colts, and the Texans. You mentioned it, the Steelers down to a backup quarterback after Kenny Pickett got hurt. And there was a report today that the Steelers are actually thinking about benching Kenny Pickett before he got hurt and going to Mitch Trubisky. So, dire situation there. The Browns are really kind of on their third string quarterback, really, depending on what Joe Flacco is really almost like their fourth string quarterback.
They had DTR and PJ Walker after Deshaun Watson.
Right. He would be the fourth quarterback to start for them.
Yep.
So, he's first string now, but he
looked okay against the Rams, at least considering his circumstances. But I mean,
he's Joe Flacco.
It's a bad
situation
for them.
A couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And the Colts, of course, are down to Gardner Minshew. So the 1 7-5 team that's not currently in the playoff bracket is the Houston Texans. Clearly, in my opinion, the best of those 4 teams.
Agreed.
Because they have CJ Stroud, and they did lose Tank Dell, my dog Tank Dell, who's in he's on, I think, all but one of my dynasty rosters. So
he's on every roster that's in first place right now. He's one of those players. I mean, he's
one of those guys.
A dog.
I got a lot of teams in first place that had Tank Dell. So that's
Houston's funny. You said, the best of those 4 teams by point differential this year. Of those 4 teams, they're plus 32. The second best would be Cleveland at plus 13. The third best would be the Colts at plus 4. And the fourth would be the Pittsburgh Steelers at minus 37. And they're the 5 seed right now.
7-5.
Yeah, at 7-5, they're minus 37. The Steelers, when they lose bad. But notably, because you're bringing up these 4 7-5 teams, 2 of them are AFC South teams with the Jags,
right? So, and only a game back, right?
They're not just jockeying for a playoff spot. If they catch the Jags are a wild card team, which would be wild.
Yeah, it would be crazy, because they controlled this division and looked to be, in a pretty good position to jockey for the bye. And
exactly.
Now, if Trevor Lawrence misses this week, or God forbid he misses more than 1 week, they're really going to start to be in trouble. There are 3 6-6 teams which are still technically in playoff contention. They are the 3 Bs, the Bengals, Bills, and Broncos. LOL. Obviously, we'll talk about the Bills, so we don't need to discuss them here. The Bengals, they got back to 500 with the Fighting Jake Brownings. The Chiefs do still have to play them, and it's tough to victory lap over the Jags too much for losing to Jake Browning, because
it's coming.
I don't want to invite that energy. Yeah. I had some Bengals fans on Twitter when I was taking some shots at Joe Burrow for being a system quarterback, which he is, on Monday night, calling it Browning head and so on and so forth. So, they're ready to go. They're ready with their 4-1 memes. They're ready with their Browning head memes. This is going to be their Super Bowl, because they're not going to the actual Super Bowl this year, or probably ever. And then, of course, the Broncos, who lost to the Houston Texans when Russell Wilson threw a hilarious game-losing interception in crunch time, trying to complete the game comeback. Yep, could not do it, could not get it done. A lot of talk in Denver this week about, potentially moving on from Russell Wilson this offseason. The Broncos, if we had scripted the Broncos season, it could not have gone better than this, except for the part where they beat us. That's the only part of their season that I have any regrets about at all. Because listen, they're 6-6. They're not going to be able to draft a quarterback. They have to move on from Russell Wilson, or they're going to eat $140 million. If they wait another year, they're going to significantly add to the tally of what they're going to take in terms of dead cap when they finally do cut him. They're going to have additional financial commitments. They almost have to do it this offseason, or wait 2 more years of him starting and collecting paychecks. They can't draft a quarterback because their record is too good, but they're not going to make the playoffs because they're currently the 9 seed. Yeah, the 9 seed. So they're not going to make the playoffs.
Well, look, dude, even if they make the playoffs, they're not going anywhere in the playoffs.
Right. In fact,
so it would be the 7th seed.
Great.
And,
right.
It would be pretty funny. And
put them in there.
And it would put them between a rock and a hard place with their decision making, because Sean Payton obviously came in, and at first everyone wanted him out. They were 1-5. They were terrible. Now they're going to kind of, they hit a hot streak where they were as fortunate on the turnover differential as you can possibly be. It was the flukiest win streak, but it put them back into a position where now all they need to do is use a fourth place schedule and back into the playoffs a little bit. And they're all going to be, they're going to be happy about at least making the playoffs, which is fine. But we all know they're going to get their ass kicked there. And now what do? They just pay their quarterback a shitload, and they stick with this coach that clearly doesn't really know what he's doing too much. I don't know.
They're going to play a second place schedule next year.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
enjoy that, guys.
It's a pretty good situation for us that the Broncos have found themselves in, and it's certainly better than if they had gone 1-15 and had one sad year, but then brought in Drake May or Caleb Williams or someone, and been right back in the thick of it the next year. So, more power to the Broncos and Russ. Let's go ahead and ride for a couple more games this year.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a fun race down the stretch. But I mean, like, the Chiefs can definitely still win this AFC. This collection of teams is garbo. I mean, like, the Chiefs are playing not well right now, but like, first of all, we're going to play our best ball in January and February if we get there, as always, like we always do. And second of all, these teams are just not good. I mean, none of these teams are good. Like Baltimore and, Miami are the really the two major threats. And like Tua and Lamar, are you kidding me? Lamar's won one playoff game. Tua's never even played in a playoff game. Like,
right.
So while we're discussing the goings on in the league, we have another mailbag question. This one came on Twitter from our guy Physio Joe. Caw-caw. Sad question for the podcast. It is unlikely, although not impossible, that Mahomes wins MVP this year. Who of the most likely candidates would you prefer win the award / who has the smallest effect on Mahomes' legacy? So if we have to pick an MVP winner that isn't going to be Patrick, who's it going to be? Here are the latest odds from FanDuel. We've got Dak and Brock Purdy. Dak Prescott and Brock Purdy are tied for the lead in MVP odds at plus 300. And right behind them at plus 350, Jalen Hurts, quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. So at the top, 3 NFC quarterbacks. Who would have thought? Not me.
No, me neither. They've been playing good ball, though.
They have been playing good ball. In fourth place behind those 3 guys is Patrick Mahomes. Now he is plus 650. So, he's obviously by his standards a little bit of a long shot, but still in fourth in those MVP odds. In fifth and sixth, tied together, plus 950. You have Lamar Jackson and Tua Tagovailoa. So look, now we've got our 3 AFC quarterbacks here. And then the next guy on the list at plus 1,500 is Tyreek Hill.
Obviously, legacy-wise, because that's the crux of this question. You want the guys that are the least likely to threaten Mahomes as either the next coming or the, just any. You don't want to look back and be like, damn, Mahomes only had one more MVP than blank. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you want to keep the guys that are going to have good careers from winning the MVPs. And so you've got 2 really interesting cases at the top with Dak and Purdy.
I agree.
You have one guy that's older in Dak that's had a reputation of kind of blowing it and kind of not really being a big game quarterback, although Zach has put up stats. He's always put up stats. He has a shitload of passing yards. He has the NFL record for the most yards in a 3-game and a 4-game span. I mean, he is a box score type of quarterback that's just never won a big game. And so him getting an MVP while he is towards the tail or end of his career is still definitely like an award that, would give him a lot more legitimacy than he currently has. And then you complete opposite situation with Brock Purdy, who, was the Mr. Irrelevant, was a 7th round pick, is in a system full of guys that are extremely good, has a coach that's extremely good. I have no idea what Brock Purdy's career trajectory looks like at all. It could be Tom Brady, or it could be, he could flame out. He could, lose the magic that he's got or whatever. He did have a stretch in their 3-game losing streak where he looked extremely human and very much not the Brock Purdy that we've seen.
Coincided with some injuries to their skill players and offensive line.
Yeah, imagine that, right?
Deebo Samuel didn't play. Ayuk was banged up. Kittle was banged up.
I think Trent Williams missed some time there. So
Trent Williams missed those games.
So the point with Purdy then is if he wins an MVP, now you're talking about like, okay, is he just going to be surrounded by luck forever? Is he just going to
Sure.
have
Is he going to
the
be Tom Brady?
career? Yeah,
Right.
So like, I have a better grip on Dak's career moving forward than I do
Yes,
Purdy's.
I completely
And
agree.
so I think it's Dak. I think the person that I would prefer now, I hate the Cowboys. And so when I was, when I was previewing this question, and I'm like, man, I'm not a big fan of a Cowboys quarterback winning an MVP. That doesn't really sit super well with me at all. But at the same time, the other options hurts. And like, I think Jalen Hurts is a hell of a good quarterback. I think he is talented. I think he has the tools to succeed for a while in the league. And I think between the three of them, we're probably going to look back at Hurts, who's already made a Super Bowl and already, been extremely good, that like, he's probably going to have the best career of the three. So give me Dak. I don't like the star getting the MVP, but give me Dak.
Yeah, I think it's Dak as well. I found myself agreeing with everything you said about Brock Purdy. I had the same thought today when I was looking at this question. I don't want to chance the possibility that he becomes Tom Brady.
Yep.
And him winning
like
an
resurrection.
MVP in his second season with this outrageous supporting cast and the coaching infrastructure around him as a late round draft pick. It's just too close. It's just too
there's
close
going to be a blown call that's going to win him a Super Bowl, and it's all happening.
Too close for comfort for me. I don't need it. I don't want it.
We've seen it
before. We don't need to see it again.
Yeah.
Don't need Brock Purdy winning an MVP. Jalen Hurts, I think would be fine. But obviously, I think the issue with him would be, would he be able to win some more, and will he be able to win some rings? Because after all, the MVP is a regular season award, and I'd be pretty comfortable giving it to a Cowboys quarterback because
they're not going to win.
I'm just saying. I listen. Laundry's not cursed, but the Cowboys haven't won anything in 30 years. Okay, and their head coach is Mike McCarthy, who is well known for his big game choking acumen, and so give Dak the MVP. He's probably going to lose in the first round of the playoffs through no fault of his own. And, there it is. We'll talk about the time that Dak Prescott, won an MVP.
Yeah, he's like Matt Ryan winning an MVP.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. That's what I was going to say, Matt Ryan. It's
it's a tiebreaker. It's a tiebreaker.
Exactly,
That's what it is.
Exactly. Now, obviously, we can't have Lamar because he already has one MVP, and then he has two. And
an AFC young quarterback.
And who knows what's going to happen with him. We don't need to give Tua an MVP because his fans Tua on.
Oh man,
they're too much, and I don't need to interact with them.
Good
so
point. I didn't think about them.
And then Tyreek, we obviously can't be giving Tyreek.
No,
I mean,
he's
very deserving.
Delegitimize Pat.
He's very deserving.
Yeah,
he
is. Honestly, he's probably the most deserving player on this list.
If there were ever a year for a non-quarterback to win MVP, it would be this year, and it would be this player.
Yes,
he's amazing. He's extremely valuable, but we can't be giving him an MVP award because we'll have people saying Pat played with an MVP wide receiver,
and
that's
it's
never
true.
happened before, and it is true. And we don't need people talking about Tyreek Hill being an MVP. So sorry, Tyreek, you're very fast. You're very good player. But we can't be giving you an MVP.
Yep.
Let's get into this game. Chiefs 19, Packers 27, Sunday Night Football. Chiefs travel to Lambeau. They can't get it done. There's a lot to process with this game. And I need a way to process this. We have the Chiefs system for our wins, and that's obviously, it's a good rubric. It's the method that they use to win their games. But we've never really developed a system for processing these losses. They happen so infrequently in the history of this podcast that we've had a couple weeks where we just skipped recapping the games entirely. We did that with the Philly game a couple of weeks ago. Extenuating circumstances, health wise, and I was on vacation. But we did it. We had a period of time where we just chickened out and, didn't recap some losses here and there. We rethemed the podcast, from It's Always Sunny in Chiefs Kingdom to, some darker themes in the dark days of 2021. But my point here is that we need a system to process these kinds of weeks. And anybody who's watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the show for which this podcast draws its inspiration and its name, the namesake for this programming that you're listening to now, knows about the Dennis system. And in that episode, the Dennis system, there's another system that is revealed to us, the viewers, and that's the MAC, move in after completion. Now, obviously, those words will not do for us, but I think the MAC system, which has nothing to do with the Chiefs, will help us process these losses. So I present to you for the first time the MAC system. M, mourn. We process our emotions. A, accuse. We apportion blame for the loss by accusing people of wrongdoing. And the C in the MAC system is cope. We look for the positives. We look for the silver linings. We look for those little bits of sunshine that this podcast is known for bringing to our listeners, if there are any. So that is going to be it. The MAC system, mourn, accuse, cope.
I am a huge fan of this system. You birthed this today, and
yes.
I think it'll help. I do. I think it's a process, and we do need to go through all of these phases, and I'm excited to go through these phases with this game because I think it'll help me get past it.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's start with Mourn. So this is just where we process our emotions, and we had some conversations about this offline. I'm back in on the Taylor Swift thing because of the Person of the Year article today. It gave me life. It gave me a boost. She's amazing. Yeah. I love her relationship with Travis. It's not a distraction, and he is playing at an extremely high level and deserves no blame for what is going on with the team. He's blameless. He is amazing. She's a golden goddess. But listen, when Taylor Swift is dating one of your players, and she's the Person of the Year, literally, like she is the monoculture. She's just everywhere. All eyes are on her. All eyes are on us. We've got Taylor Swift in the stands. We're the defending Super Bowl champions, right? Like it's year 2 without Tyreek Hill, who might get MVP votes this year, right? Like he's chirping. We gave Patrick Mahomes, the greatest player in the world, a box of scraps at wide receiver, right? And they're total dog shit. And they've revealed themselves to be total dog shit several times in primetime and for all the world to see, right? Like we just have put the spotlight on this team to an incredible level. And when we win, it's the best because everybody has to talk about us. We come in on Monday morning, we turn on the other podcasts, we watch Nick Wright and, Skip Bayless and whatever. People get angry, people get excited, people get happy. But when you lose, man, it sucks so bad. Like, listen, being 8-4 and like the defending Super Bowl champions, like that's a good place to be.
Sounds good on the surface.
You're only one game out of first place in the AFC, and the AFC is terrible this year. Like in a vacuum, good place to be. But man, this loss and all the losses this year have sucked.
Yeah.
It sucks to watch this team lose. The expectations are so high. The spotlight is so bright. It just is terrible. It's awful.
It's being the main character. That's what it is.
Yes.
It's absolutely the Chiefs have been since Mahomes' MVP season. And really, Tom Brady retiring sure helped. But like the Chiefs have been the main character now for a while. And with that comes all the spoils of war, of winning, and of being the main character, and everyone talking about you, and all the new fans, and all the attention, and it's great. And it feeds your ego. I mean, there's a lot about being the main character that is unbeatable. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. But the losses, as you detailed, are so much more excruciating. I feel more pain in a regular season Chiefs loss than the history of the Detroit Lions. Like their whole franchise added up doesn't amount to one of these random Chiefs losses because none of those losses matter at all.
Right.
And these losses matter so much. Every single week is an inflection point on a possible dynasty or collapse. Every week.
Right.
You think about, things go right. We look back on this in 20 years as the greatest run in sports history, blah, blah, blah. Things go wrong and we will regret how this stretch has gone for the rest of our lives. So like the weight of all of that, if it's on you and me, just imagine the weight on the coaches and players and everyone involved with this team. It's unbelievable. But yes, to sum it up, it sucks to lose. That part of the morning is as obvious as any other part to me.
Yeah. It's rough. So while we're in mourning, we should talk about the injuries again here really quick. We talked about this obviously in the news segment, but an absolutely brutal game injury wise. It's fortunate, and this sort of is like also a little bit of Accuse and a little bit of cope as well that I'm rolling
Sure.
into one little
Sure.
ball here. But like, I mean, it certainly played a huge role in the outcome of the game. Being down to Tranquil did not start the year with the green dot. Fortunately, he's a veteran player who, despite only being in the system for this being his first season in the system, has been excellent when he's been out there and asked to get the defense lined up and coordinate everything that's kind of happening on the back end from the middle linebacker spot. But he goes out. Jack Cochran comes in, a third string middle linebacker with a year and a half of experience. He's an undrafted free agent, right? Like, not a guy with pedigree, not a guy who you want to be coming into the game to have the green dot as a middle linebacker against a defense that is against an offensive scheme that is like famous for fucking with linebackers and being just absolutely impossible for linebackers to play against. Just really tough. I mean, like, it's great that none of the injuries appear to be season ending. That's great, but just seeing guy after guy go down was demoralizing as a fan. And you've got to think that it's just a million times worse for the players on the sidelines because, you see these guys that you practice with and that you know what they can do. And, I mean, it would be like consecutive snaps. Tranquil goes down.
Yeah.
Cook goes down a little bit after that, just a few plays later. I think it was on the following drive. You had Donovan
Justin Reed
Smith
spent some time down. He came back.
Justin Reed went down, came into the game, but he was out for a few snaps. Donovan Smith goes out on the same drive that Pacheco. It looks like Pacheco's getting hurt. I mean, it just was relentless.
Like flies.
It was brutal, and it felt terrible.
Yeah, and injury luck or injury, management has been one of the Chiefs' bright spots this season. You know how many times the broadcast crew mentioned, I believe they mentioned both the offensive line and the secondary as having started every game together so far this year, and how that's a rare thing in the NFL for either of those to happen.
Sure.
For you to be, in week 13 and have your O-line be 5 for 5 every week, and then the four guys in the secondary. So, I mean, the consistency had been there through the first 11 wins or 11 games of the season. And then now it's like it all came to a head at once. Everybody started dropping, and you like you said, third linebacker and all this different. I mean, it was tough, and it was tough because it was Lambeau and it was snowing, and it was, I mean, just a lot of, it's a primetime game. If that had happened at noon, I don't know. I guess part of that, the primetime games are so much weightier in the narrative and in the like let's talk about this for now. The primetime losses so far this year. They lost week 1, the opener, the banner night to Detroit. That was a tough one. That was in front of the whole world.
Including us in person.
They did happen to win on Sunday Night Football at the Jets, but the Jets didn't have Rodgers. That win always felt like
it was a close game.
And it was that exactly. And Zach Wilson looked like fucking Aaron Rodgers out there.
It wasn't fun.
It was not fun. It was not a good game. Even though they won it, they certainly stressed us to hell out. They did win week 6 Thursday night against Denver, but I mean, that was 19-8. And then Denver came back and beat them 2 weeks later. So like, I didn't even sit with that win for very long at all. Right. Week 9 was against Miami and Germany. I count that as primetime because of obviously the eyeballs, but that game was a 21-0 lead that was blown down to 21-14 and could have lost that game. And it'd be very stressful, very emotional there. And then the back-to-back, the last 2 primetime games, week 11, Monday Night Football, Super Bowl rematch, big lead, lose that game. And then this game. So like the Chiefs on primetime when everyone's been watching this year has been brutal. It's been so hard. And then when they've been Sunday games, Sunday afternoon games or whatever, they look like the champs. They look great.
Right.
But it's been tough. It's been really tough.
Yeah, I guess the last little item of mourning here is that Taylor Swift saw her first loss in attendance. Just a tough situation. She said
it could happen.
In the Person of the Year article that she loves football. She's been missing out all these years, that she's been focused on music. It's very funny for me as a Johnny Come Lately Swiftie to go back and like watch her original videos where it's like, I'm a geeky high school girl and look at this hunky guy on the football team. And here we are. Now we come full circle. But
she did it.
It was a bummer that she finally got to see her first loss in person. I would love, by the way, this is not mourning. It doesn't really fit with the rubric, but I've just been thinking that what I really need is a documentary of specifically her and Brittany in the booth together. And I want to know what those conversations are like, because I would guess that like Brittany is responsible for a lot of Taylor Swift's newfound football knowledge.
Like
right?
95% of it.
I would guess that like Brittany is up there telling Taylor Swift about ball,
everything,
teaching Taylor Swift ball like the whole game, you know, because as we've discussed many times on this podcast, Brittany sure as hell knows ball.
She does.
And
she
guarantee you she is up there educating the hell out of Taylor Swift. I would love to be a fly on the wall for those conversations.
She's been attached at the hip with Patrick since their high school days of him playing football. So like, I mean, that's been their huge part of their relationship. So she absolutely does. And, you know, this game was a real raw up close example of injury during football games.
Yeah.
You know, Brian Cook was carted off. That was an injury that Taylor Swift, the type of injury she has not seen in one of these games in person so far, of the whole game stopping, you know, the extended commercial breaks for us as viewers while everybody sits on a knee and prays and all this scary stuff that we are used to now as football fans. But like, she sure as shit is not used to that. And just imagining her thinking about that being Travis and having Brittany next to her to be like, girl, I've been there when Patrick was down there. You can, that's a really good sounding board for her. That's a really good way to process what's going on and the fact that it could be the person that she's there to cheer on and stuff. So I do think that Brittany is a huge positive part of Taylor Swift's Chiefs game experience. And hopefully, you know, that's been a big thing for her because Brittany knows ball. She's been there. She's done it.
Someday we're going to get a Miss Americana / quarterback, blend, and it's going to be amazing. Maybe a future season quarterback, even
Miss Quarterback Kana.
Miss Quarterback Kana. Let's go to A in the MAC system. That's Accuse. I'm going to start this off with a mailbag question here. We got another one from our guy. No one special. Trevor 21703. So here's a question for the podcast. When do we admit that the Nagy experiment has been a failure? So the spirit of Accuse is for us to apportion blame to, it doesn't have to be people on the Chiefs. It obviously
can point fingers and stuff.
External factors. But let's start off with this mailbag question. Matt Nagy, first year as the Chiefs offense coordinator. It obviously has not gone well. How much blame are you assigning to Matt Nagy for this debacle?
Well, if we're talking about the season, like big picture,
sure,
which we kind of are. I mean, it's just another loss. You kind of
can't do it
right
at the offensive coordinator. You can't look at a single game really.
So we have been long frustrated with the secrecy, the behind closed doorsness of it all with the Chiefs offensive staff and who does what, why, and what the situation is. It's hard because this Accuse step in the processing is something that we fans have been doing. This is what you do every time you lose.
Right.
And like, we want to find the person that's responsible and to tell them to get lost and to do all that. That's a normal part of the mourning process as a sports fan. And like, we don't know. We don't know what Matt Nagy does. We don't know what he's influenced positively or negatively. All we can do is compare this version of the Chiefs to the versions without it. And so far, the reviews are not good for the Matt Nagy Chiefs. They're just not, it's just not working. And, there have been other things that have changed besides the offensive coordinator. If this was the exact same 53-man roster with the exact same everything and he was the only one that switched, we could A/B test. But we can't do that. There have been other changes. It's just, how much blame do we assign Matt Nagy? Some unknown amount that's not zero. Some definitely personally accountable. Like, he should be held accountable for this in some capacity. And it's up to Andy and it's up to Veach and it's up to the people that know what he's done in a day in and day out basis to specifically assign that amount of blame. Maybe they are very happy with his performance as an OC, and maybe they feel that this is not something that he has had much say in or control over the outcome of these games. But like, from our perspective, I can't help but think like, what's different? Oh, Matt Nagy. So
sure.
So he's got to be part of it.
Yeah, I think he is part of it. I think, it's obviously it's hard to do anything but speculate with a question like this because we're not in the organization and we don't know exactly who's doing what. But I think like when you look at the things the offense has struggled with this year, it is easy to construct a narrative, whether true or not. It is easy to make this narrative that you've got Eric Bieniemy and wide receivers coach Greg Lewis out the door and replaced by, a young, inexperienced wide receivers coach and a guy who obviously has experience as an offensive coordinator with this system and in, this franchise. And not that he was coordinating for Mahomes because Andy called plays the one game of the year in 2017 where Pat made his debut. He was essentially functioning as Pat's offensive coordinator and still is because he's the one probably calling plays as far as we know. But, I think seeing what Eric Bieniemy's been able to do in Washington, where he is running the show and, really has constructed a very competent offense with fifth round, second year quarterback Sam Howell, who's taking like 8,000 sacks and, not an incredibly talented offensive cast. I mean, they've got, Terry McLaurin would obviously blow any of our wide receivers completely out of the water.
That's not hard.
And they've got a couple of guys there that would blow any of our receivers completely out of the water. But, the offensive line isn't great. Their running game hasn't been great. And, you've got a quarterback that's taking sacks at a prodigious rate, and he's cleaned that up. And then, I mean, we saw the players grumble about how tough he is, but he's been producing. He's been getting results. And I think the problem with Nagy, again, this is just speculating, constructing a narrative, but I think the problem with Nagy is we saw in Chicago, kind of his stubborn streak. Like there was a game I remember with Mitch Trubisky. Remember Mitch Trubisky was his quarterback. I remember very distinctly a game where the Bears ran the ball like 3 times and they passed like 45 times or something like that.
Yeah.
I
remember this narrative.
Fudging these numbers a little bit, but like they set some sort of record for the most consecutive pass attempts, and it was in a 1-score game. I mean, like
with Mitch Trubisky.
And listen, Eric Bieniemy did this earlier this year. I think they actually might have literally set a record for most consecutive plays without a rush attempt in that weird game against the Bears on Thursday Night Football.
Wow, everything's just coming together.
Everything's just coming together. But the point is, I think Eric Bieniemy, I think Andy and Matt Nagy, I think that they have their conceptions of offense are so similar. They want to scheme the hell out of stuff. They want their wide receivers to learn all these different route combinations. They want everybody to be able to play, different positions, line up everywhere, etc. I think they both want a complicated, beautiful offense that looks great on, the chalkboard. But like, I don't know that this personnel that they have brought in is capable of doing that. And I do think that there is something to be said, again, anecdotally, for Eric Bieniemy being able to simplify and dumb things down because he's had to do that, in Washington with a second-year, fifth-round quarterback. And so all that to say that I think some blame for Matt Nagy is appropriate. I can't put a percentage on it, but I think and you could really even point to the coaching staff as a whole, especially, the offensive coaching staff
for sure.
A whole. Connor Embry for sure. I think Andy is as culpable as whatever amount of blame you want to assign to Matt Nagy, a portion of the same amount of blame to Andy Reid, because I really do think the issue in part is that, these wide receivers don't know what they're supposed to be doing on these plays. They're supposed to be reading the defense and adjusting their routes, and they just don't know how, or at least if whatever they're doing is not the same thing that the quarterback is doing. And the quarterback's 2-time MVP and one of the greatest players of all time. So like he gets the benefit of it out here. The wide receivers the ones fucking this up. Just have him run a route. Travis Kelce, let him do whatever he wants because he has the mind meld. They're going to be able to get together and produce no matter what. But the other guys, they just need to be running fixed routes. Don't worry about making adjustments. Obviously, if the quarterback's scrambling, find a way to get open. But woof. Long answer there, but it's a fruitful discussion. I think it's worth kind of diving into a little bit. This next one, we don't necessarily need to spend a ton of time on. We don't need to talk about pass interference. Everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows that if you mug a wide receiver, like when the ball is still 15 yards away in the air, that's pass interference. Everybody
so
knows
triggered
that.
right now.
Except for the officials, the three officials that had direct sight lines to this play as it was happening and decided not to throw a flag for pass interference. Those officials don't know that, but everybody else does know that. We don't need to break the rules down. Everybody just knows what it was. Now listen, the late hit out of bounds, that wasn't. He was still in bounds, legal hit. That didn't affect the game. It was a bad call, but it didn't affect the game. The no call on PI obviously affects the game. Now, do the Chiefs score a touchdown in that scenario if they get the ball, at the 8 or whatever it would have been? Plus, then they had to get the 2-point conversion just to tie it, just to send it to overtime. They tried a 2-point conversion earlier in this game, and it utterly, hilariously failed. But obviously, the Chiefs' chances of winning the game are greatly improved if the officials just call an obvious foul and give the Chiefs a penalty. I don't know.
Yeah, it was this one particular play because, again, like you said, we'll get into this a little bit more in the recap in a bit, but the PI was as egregious of a missed PI as I've seen in any football game since Saints-Rams in 2018. I mean, draped all over him. This is not Chiefs fans being like, you could have called PI here. This is saying that there is 0% chance that receiver can make that catch with that defender on. 0.
Yeah, it's not a judgment call. It just is
draped on his back and taking him to the ground. And I mean,
right.
If the reason that they did not call this was because of some perceived makeup call for thinking that they blew a call in the Chiefs' favor earlier in the game, that is 2 wrongs not making a right. That is not you cannot blow a call and then to fix it blow a call the other way. That is not a professional organization. That is not how the NFL should be conducted. That part of it really pisses me off if that's how it was. Or if it was like some type of anti-Chiefs, like they always get calls in big situations or people say they do. So we're going to make sure that, we don't give them the benefit of the doubt because we don't want people giving us shit for whatever the case may be. You got to call the play. You got to call the play as you see it, no matter what the circumstances are. It's the same thing with the Bradbury hold in the Super Bowl. The penalty's the penalty. You just can't modify your decision of when you want to call it or not based on other extenuating circumstances. That part pisses me off the most. That part is my cope with what's going on right now with the refs. It's just that they not only did they screw it up. Oh, they screwed it up that's my accuse, not my cope. They just screwed everything up about this, and it pisses me off so much.
And there's no accountability for it, which we discussed. You obviously have been a big proponent for a long time of a ref combine and, full-time year-round professional refs that aren't,
accountants out there.
Yeah,
Brad
exactly.
Allen has no idea what he's doing.
Lawyers out there in the off-season that are doing God knows what, and then they go out on a football field and we're expecting them to make these calls, in a split second when there's, human missiles flying around them. They're in the combat zone out there, and it just doesn't happen. The wide receivers. I guess I could put a percentage on the officiating. It's hard to do with Ben Nagy, but like in terms of this game, this loss, I feel like the officiating was like 20% of it. Again, like, if they get that call right, the Chiefs still have to get the ball in the end zone, and they still have to convert a 2-point conversion just to send it to overtime. Green Bay maybe gets the coin toss, goes down and scores a touchdown against defense that have played a lot of snaps. Who knows? But I'd say like 20%. Turning to the wide receivers, I mean, another ghastly performance by them, and I guess we can kind of lump them in with your accuse here that you've added to the show document, which is Andy Reid and Brett Veach, because at this point, I think we can draw a couple of firm conclusions about the wide receiver group. One is that they're not very good. And the second is that we probably should have all known that they wouldn't be that good. I feel like a jackass because I pointed out in a tweet that I'm surprised nobody has dug up and put me on blast for. Please don't do that, our loyal listeners. Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. You will be excommunicado from this podcast if you put me on blast for this tweet that I'm about to own up to. I tweeted something out in in the preseason. Just kind of pointing out that you've got Justin Ross, a guy that would have been a first or second round pick if, he had been healthy and things had broken the right way for him on the roster. You have Sky Moore, a former second round pick. You have Rashee Rice, who was a second round pick in this year's draft. You have Kadarius Toney, who the Chiefs, remember, were hyping up as a wide receiver one in the offseason.
Sure.
And by the way, was a first round pick,
Yeah.
in the room. And you've got, some complementary pieces in MVS and Justin Watson. And I really thought this would be one of the best and deepest wide receiver units that they have had in the Mahomes era. And it's the opposite of that. It's the worst and the thinnest. None of these guys are any good except for Rashee Rice. And they can't lean on him all the time because he's a rookie and he doesn't know the full route tree. And it just is it's an out and out disaster. And whether we should have seen it coming or not, the Chiefs definitely should have seen some level of this coming. I'm not saying that they should have anticipated it being as bad as it is, but they definitely should have anticipated that they needed to do something and they didn't do it.
Yeah, and maybe part of the failure that we don't know about is that they attempted to do something about it, and whether that was that they couldn't pull off a trade or couldn't bring in a free agent or whatever the case may be, that's still a failure. Even if you recognize the problem but can't do anything to fix it, this is on the roster construction as much as it is on the individual talent on the roster. All those guys are out there just trying to make a living and be the best for, it's really hard for me to sit here. We can jokingly name Sky Moore the trash man and do all that type of stuff, but like Sky Moore's problem is not that he's out there trying to lose games. It's just that he's not good enough to be in the position that they've put him in. He's not. And so because of that, yeah, that's where I kind of lean from. Sure, the wide receivers don't make the plays in the moments, but it's the fault of the roster construction that those wide receivers were put in that position in the first place. Sure. So yes, lump the wide receivers and Andy and Veach kind of into this whole amalgamation of like the wide receiver room has failed this team this year. It's just straight up cost them clearly 2 games. Very clearly the MVS drop and the Toney situation in week 1, like those were wins. Those were wins that became losses. And then the rest of it has just kind of been this slog through the season of not being able to catch stuff. They lead the NFL in drops. So like, yes, all of them have been accused of our frustration.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, they're accused of malfeasance, gross treason, and high crimes and misdemeanors, and treason most foul. In this game and really the entire season. I'd give them for this game, I don't know, that whole group that we're just talking about, 30 to 40%, pretty high.
Sure. Yeah.
One other that we'll discuss briefly. We've already kind of talked about it. The defense. I thought the defense looked pretty soft on the first 2 drives of the game, both of them resulting in touchdowns for the Packers. But I'm not going to apportion. I mean, the defense is getting 5 to 10% of the blame for me for this game. They weren't good, but obviously there were hugely extenuating circumstances here with, just repeated injury after injury against a team that has been playing well offensively, and literally their offense is designed to just put linebackers in particular in a bind, and you've got a 3rd string, second-year undrafted linebacker with the green dot out there. Not really a fair situation. I think under the circumstances that they played pretty well. Would you go higher than 10, 15% for how much blame you're assigning
the defense 0.0% of the blame in this game. And spicy. Number one, certainly the injuries. You get a 3rd string lineman on the first 7 snaps of the game that has to come in and be the green dot for the whole game. Number 2, the Packers hit back-to-back plays that had a next-gen stats percentage of completion of 30% or lower. They had a 4th and 1 prayer jump ball that Romeo Doubs came down with. It was just
I feel like the defense should have come up with that, though.
I mean, but minus 30% means that it wasn't a good that he was covered well, that every part about the play, if he was wide open, if the defense didn't cover him, then that percentage jumps way up. And then they hit Christian Watson in the back of the end zone in just a prayer, just a back foot, fading away as the pressure was right in Love's face, and he just gets a ball up there that they come down with. So the Packers definitely were in their bag for this game. They definitely came out as an offense that, while they've been playing some good ball lately, pulled off some shit. And you have one side that's scoring touchdowns in the red zone, and you have another side that is kicking field goals or turning the ball over and obviously doing the stupid shit that the Chiefs always do. And then it's just really hard for me to be frustrated at all with the Chiefs defense, given how the season's gone. They have been absolute warriors. They've been absolutely the only reason that the Chiefs have won maybe 4 or 5 of these games. The only reason. So, no, 0.0% of the blame for me comes to the defense.
All right, let's turn to C, and that's cope. And we'll just
please.
Rattle off some cope here, some hardcore copium. Guzzle the copium down with us.
Inject
and we'll do it. So just really quickly here, some things that I told myself to cope with this. First, at least it's an NFC team. We already talked about this. It means the Chiefs are going to maintain their tiebreaker over Baltimore, assuming that they, can even the record. It would be really hard for the Chiefs to end up with the same record as Baltimore, but end up with a worse AFC conference record.
I think it's impossible, and
I think it
because now those two teams might end up with the same record, but it's not going to be for the 1 seed. It's not going to be for the first round bye. So if they're jockeying between 3 and 4, who gives a shit? Who cares? Really? I mean so. But yes, if they're going to be with each other, that's going to be because the Chiefs catch Baltimore by 1 game and have the tiebreaker. And this is legitimate. This is legitimate cope. Like the NFC, the first tiebreaker. This is not their strength of victory, 6 tiebreakers.
Right. No.
Like this is a half game. This is a half game in the standings by having the tiebreaker. And you're right. An NFC loss here is the best team you can possibly lose to if you're going to lose a game. The Chiefs have only lost NFC teams and then their shitty Broncos game. So yeah, not bad.
Not too bad. The other piece of cope here, I've got a couple more, only 19 points, but hey, look, they essentially had 4 straight scoring drives to start the game. They had field goals on the first 2 drives, which, I'd prefer to see touchdowns there. This is just sort of limited cope. There's only so much that we have to work with here. They did kneel with 9 seconds left in the first half, so they didn't try and, can you imagine trying to do like a 13 seconds drive with this roster and this construction?
No, it'd be impossible.
Last year
they threw a pick six.
They did it in 12 seconds against the Bills, and got a field goal out of it. I mean, 9 seconds, that's too little time even for the Chiefs at their peak, but kneeled it down. But then they started the second half with 2 straight touchdown drives, which, is great to see coming out of the half. They've been absolutely terrible in the second half this year, and they did that. Now, granted, after you had your 4 straight scoring drives to start the game, they went punt, interception, turnover on downs after that. But, this was another game where we saw something from the offense where I was like, all right, yeah, I can squint and see this being a pretty good offense in January, which with the defense that we know the level it can play at, it's a possible championship level offense. We didn't see it for the whole game. Obviously it would have been great if they could have scored a touchdown to tie the game on one of those last 3 drives instead of punting, throwing an interception, and turning it over on downs. But there was a little bit there.
There was a 3rd and 18 conversion to Kelsey for 27 yards on the first touchdown drive, which was vintage Chiefs offense. A long 3rd and 18 conversion. You kidding me? That's like their DNA over the last couple of years.
It is. But not this year. So it was good to see it back.
No, the involvement of Pacheco, along with Rashee Rice, is something that we have seen over the last 2 weeks. And clearly there is something to that trio of Kelsey, Pacheco, and Rice being the focal points of the offense. Forget everything you've ever wanted to see from Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney and, Justin Watson, all those guys. You just got to focus on your three big guys, and they do a pretty good job out there when they do that. So that part was part of this, those 2 back-to-back touchdown drives that were encouraging. And then second half scoring there, like you said. Just coming out and not feeling like after half that the other team completely outcoached you and did better adjustments than you and all that stuff. They came out and they knew they were in it for a fight. And that's good to see. And the last thing I'll say about this is the high variance of only having 7 offensive drives for the Chiefs.
Means very weird.
Very weird. You lose the game by a touchdown, 8 points. And if one of those Packer drives if each team only has 7 drives, it's so easy to flip the script on one of those drives for either team, and the whole game gets thrown, upside down. So like that part of it, if this team had gone out there and gotten their asses kicked for 60 minutes and had 15 shots at the ball and scored 19 points or whatever, like, yeah, that's a big problem. But they scored 19 points on 7 total drives. That's a pretty good clip. That's like
pretty good.
That's like a high scoring offense in this scenario. And the Packers
drive. I mean, that's
and the Packers scored 27 on their 7 drives, which is unsustainable. Not something that, you can really say that the Chiefs defense is going to give up more than 4 points a drive. That's not going to happen. So yeah, it's it was weird. It was a weird game. The pace was weird. And I agree with that part of the cope that the offense showed signs of life.
Yeah, just a couple to add here. We've got, defense. You apportion them 0% of the blame. So just carrying off that thought, you think that the defense would play better if they didn't have so many guys getting hurt in the middle of the game. That's legitimate cope right there. I don't feel like I'm bending over backwards to service anybody that's listening to the podcast here. Those are just facts, And Harrison Butker still perfect, which actually leads us into our final segment, the awards. And for those of you unfamiliar, we have 5-star men.
Five-star man! Five-star man!
We have trash men.
I'm the trash man. I come out, I throw trash all over the ring, and then I start eating garbage.
And we have wild cards.
Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
And I'm just going to get it out of the way. I'm going to give my 5-star man award to Harrison Butker, who is still perfect on the season through 13 weeks, which is crazy. And I mean, perfect. He hasn't missed a single kick. He hasn't missed a field goal. He hasn't missed an extra point. It's honestly one of the most insane runs that we've ever seen by any NFL player at any position. I mean, to be perfect on field goals and extra points through 13 weeks of the season is utterly absurd.
Yeah, he's he's been as automatic and reliable as a team that doesn't have an automatic and reliable offense needs.
Yes.
When you're not like, if 2018 Butker had been perfect, so we're going to score 38 points a game instead of 30.
Right.
It's not really that much of a difference. You don't notice it. Now, maybe it is exactly the same amount of EPA or whatever, but like, you don't feel like every kick is so important. But when you're not blowing teams out, when you're in close games, when you have to have every point that you're attempting, for him to have been perfect on bombs, perfect on the short ones, which we have, long said that that's been his biggest bugaboo, is extra points and short field goals. He has the biggest leg in the NFL outside of Justin Tucker, and probably neck and neck or leg and leg with Justin Tucker at this point. But but the shanks, the close-up shanks, a lot of that kind of came around the time that he screwed his ankle up in Arizona at the start of last year, came back from that, wasn't really consistent, but I mean, every extra point on long extra points this year. This is not the NFL before 2015 when they, had 18-yard extra points. These are kicks. These are 33-yard extra points. And he's hit every single one of them, and every single kick, including 50-yarders. Just what more can you say about him? Great pick for you for the 5-star man. I am going to go with what I think has been the most impressive offensive player over the last 2 weeks for the Chiefs. And that's,
you picked him last week.
Yeah, Isaiah Pacheco's been awesome.
Yeah,
he has been physical. He has been explosive. He has been carrying the load. I mean, 110 yards this week and a short touchdown run, but just absolutely needed in every aspect of this offense that does not have playmakers. They don't have a lot. They've got Kelsey. They got flashes of Rashee Rice, but Isaiah Pacheco has been, if they didn't hit on that 7th round draft pick, and if they didn't get this guy into the building, and they were trying to trot out fucking Clyde Edwards-Helaire out there.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean?
Like starting running back.
He saved this team from, disaster on offense. And I mean, what more can you say about the toughness? They talked about how when he got bent up in that play where he got injured with his leg, not his shoulder, that he was so strong that as he was kind of getting bent around, he muscled his way out of that contact and straightened himself out so that he wouldn't fall over backwards and hurt himself more. I mean, the kid is just head to toe muscle. Certainly the most physically gifted offensive player the Chiefs have had since Tyreek Hill, as far as like
Yeah,
build
I think that's fair.
and pound for pound. Like, he's not Derrick Henry's size, but damn, I've brought up Derrick Henry almost every time I've talked about Isaiah Pacheco because he runs like him. You mentioned this earlier when we were talking about or in whatever previous segment that was, but the pile push, the
Tarico,
one man
brotherly shove
was as much as I've ever seen an NFL pile move in my entire 30 years of watching NFL football. I mean, from the 15 to the 5, basically, or like maybe the 13 to the 3. I mean, they got right down towards the goal line, but just sheer will, sheer strength. Love that kid. He is my 5-star man.
Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, we have to dole out the honorary Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Sky Moore Trashman Awards. And for my pick, I will say that both of the namesakes for these awards, Sky Moore and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, were extremely tempting options this week.
They always are.
They always are, and that is why these awards are named for them. But I have to give mine to Marquez Valdes-Scantling this week. I've had people come at me on Twitter when I complain about him and say, this is who he is. This is who he's always been. He's inconsistent. He's streaky. He doesn't have good hands. All those things are true. And if you look back if you look at his catch rate, his success rate, a lot of those things are pretty steady in terms of his career averages. The problem is that he is the guy in this wide receiver room that was expected to step up. He was the one guy pretty much in this wide receiver room that was a professional NFL wide receiver who is getting paid a lot of money. And, I don't want to see, him playing to or down from his ability. I want to see him stepping up. I want to see him leading the locker room. I want to see him fucking play through contact. I don't understand how somebody that is as willing a blocker as he is, because he's a really good blocker. I don't understand why he can't be physical at the catch point and go up for the ball, fight back for the ball. You're getting a pass interference call maybe not, because you should have gotten a pass interference call anyway. I shouldn't say you're definitely getting one. No, you got a better chance. You got a better chance of getting a pass interference call if you were fighting through the contact to try and get to the ball. It feels like he's just giving up on plays. I just don't understand how somebody who was in the building last year and played with this exact same offense seemingly knows the playbook worse than he did last year. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Last year, he was getting 4.7 targets a game. This year, he's getting 3 targets a game, and the wide receiver room sucks. He could get 8 targets a game if he was any good at all, but he is not. He's my trash man.
Yeah.
Who's your guy?
He is who he is, and who he is not a very good football player.
I know.
Not very good.
But he's worse than who he is, too, because we're talking about a 50% drop off in yards per game, 40 last year, 22 this year. I mean, it just is. It's not acceptable behavior.
He's getting worse, certainly, and he isn't good at catching the football. So why?
No. And he never has been. But
no, he's always at least been. Yeah, he had Aaron Rodgers for a long time where he would run behind the defense. He was probably younger and had a little bit more energy to do those. Pop, sure. Yeah, a little bit more go route ability on those. And then when Rodgers saw him open, he would get him the ball, and that was how he made his whole career there. Here, the Chiefs are trying to have him do more actual, real NFL wide receiver stuff, and he's just not good. He's just not good. Like you said, he sucks. It's unfortunate. I don't like to make fun of people for just being bad, but when they are bad, we have to call them out. That's our job.
Yeah. Yep.
My trash men, or I guess I could call man and say Brad Allen, but men, I am picking the refs. And look,
all right.
If I were to be one of those fans that lost a game and bitched about the refs, then in this segment, I would talk about the calls that they blew against the Chiefs, because there were many of them. But in this segment, to highlight how bad these referees were in this game, I have 2 plays for submission here. Okay. The first play,
if you were a fan that was going to complain about the refs, which you're not,
I'm not. So actually, no. If I was a fan that was going to complain about the refs during a loss, I would talk about Chiefs plays that they blew.
Oh, I see.
But instead, I have 2 plays for submission. The first play is the Patrick Mahomes roughing the passer out of bounds with less than.
Oh, sure, yeah.
This call was terrible.
It was terrible.
Mahomes was at the line, which means he's fighting for a first down. He was inbounds. The Packers defender shouldered him out of bounds very respectfully. Like, it was a hit, but this was probably the 100th worst hit Mahomes has taken this year as the Chiefs quarterback.
Sure.
There was zero reason in a crunch time, prime time game that the referee should have been throwing that flag. I immediately knew that the Chiefs got gifted 15 yards there in a drive where they absolutely had to have every yard because they were trying to score a touchdown.
Sure.
I mean, that call was garbage.
It was
Garbage
bad.
call. And then in this very same drive before the PI, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the very same, catches a ball, gets wrapped up by Packers defenders, whoever was in the corner, and they're trying to tackle him in bounds because there's 30 seconds on a ticking clock left, right?
Right.
And he is reaching for out of bounds, but going backwards through the contact, which is that is an inbounds. He didn't make it out of bounds. They got him. That should have been absolutely running clock. Absolutely. There's no question in my mind about it. The referee on the sideline gave the signal that he got out of bounds.
Right.
For seemingly no reason at all. I don't know what she was looking at. I don't know how those rules aligned to the point where she thought that was an out of bounds play. It very clearly wasn't. And then for the icing on the cake, for the anti-Packers calls, I will put in that fumble that Rashee Rice was down. And this was within 40 seconds left of the game. And the Packers picked it up and ran it back for a touchdown. This was blown on so many levels. Number one, if a play like that gets overturned, then the call is down by contact and the clock is still running on a down by contact play.
Right.
And the Chiefs, having the ball at that point under 2 minutes, would have either had to burn their last timeout or take a 10-second runoff. They enforced neither of them. And the fact that when the Packers were running that back, no time went off the clock during that fumble run back, which does happen in those cases.
Right.
Like, you don't get that time back. Right. And none of that mattered. None of that happened. The refs completely blew it. So look, I'm a fan of the team that lost the game. And when the fan of the team that loses the game bitches about the refs, usually it's because they didn't want to lose the game. I'm pissed that I lost the game. But this case, they were so objectively bad towards both teams at the end of this game. They're just incompetent. They're just not good at their jobs. They're not held to the same standard that NFL coaches, NFL players, NFL executives are held to, where they do their jobs or they get replaced by someone that will. That's how the whole league works. Billions of dollars in this league. And they cannot afford to hire somebody for full time that's young, that's athletic, that can watch these plays and think of a split-second decision. That you don't have to be good at football, but you sure as shit need to be better than these old fucks that are out there calling these games.
And just to add to that rant, how about somebody that's going to go up and face the media after the game? Not that's going to issue, Can
I read the pool report?
Yes, please.
This is unfucking believable. So, of course, Brad Allen is asked by one lonely reporter that he types in and puts it out to the media as a press release, but it's not not a camera. They don't show him the play and say, "Explain to me."
I don't even know what Brad Allen looks like, because how could you?
Yeah. Question: there were two calls in this game that I have questions about. Oh, just two? Pool reporter Calvin Wilkins.
Right,
okay, sure. The first one, Patrick Mahomes got hit out of bounds with 65 seconds to go. Personal foul was called. What did you see on the play? The covering official believed that the defender made late and unnecessary contact on the quarterback, so that was the call. These plays happened so fast. Was there a discussion about whether or not the quarterback was still in bounds? Internal conversations happen on every play. He's just saying, "Yeah, we always talk about shit all the time." And the covering official
can't know what we talked about.
And the covering official was certain that the call had been made correctly. Oh, well, if he was certain it was made correctly, who cares if it was actually made correctly? Question: on the 1st and 10 deep ball, a few plays later, it looked like the Packers player was kind of draped over the Chiefs receiver there, and there was no call. What did you see? First of all, these fucking questions. Oh my God, talk about
terrible.
I mean, was Goodell asking these questions? And then, as you know, on every play where there may or may not be pass interference, either offensive or defensive, the covering official has to rule whether contact materially restricts the receiver. And in this case, the covering official were in good position and ruled that there was no material restriction.
Yeah, they
rose
were
to the level.
Jesus.
They made the call. He's basically saying they called what they called. It is what it is the answer from Brad Allen. Question: was there a determining factor if the ball wasn't catchable? Did that have anything to do with why there wasn't a call? I'm not aware of the catchability was involved. The covering officials simply did not feel that there was the level of contact that rose to the material restriction for defensive pass interference. Basically, he called it, and so there's nothing else I can say. He threw the flag.
Right.
He thought that that's what he saw. I have no say here. I have no opinion here. I didn't talk to him about anything. I didn't, like, it's just, I'm so mad.
Let's move on.
The rest are trash men.
We got to move away from this trash before it unzips us further and just turns us into piles of trash ourselves. Let's do wild cards really quick. These are players who are capable of anything. I got to throw out Richie James. Listen, he only had 1 catch, 2 targets, 12 yards, but he did have 2 kick returns in this game, one of which he popped off for 31 yards. Looked like he had, potential to have an even bigger return there. He's got some juice. And listen, I'm not saying that he's great, but we are in desperate times. And this man had 569 yards receiving last year, catching balls from Daniel Jones in the Giants offense, which is a terrible offense. And those are terrible wide receivers. And by the standards of this wide receiver unit, 569 yards last year catching balls from Daniel Jones, that's something. That's like that puts him
Sky Moore's career.
Yeah, sure. It's way ahead of Sky Moore. It would be one of the best seasons of Marquez Valdez-Scantling's career. It certainly would dwarf his production this year. He looks, I don't know about capable of anything, but he definitely looks like he's capable of more competent wide receiver play than Sky Moore or Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who are both still starting for this football team. So that's my wild card, Richie James Jr.
I like it.
Pops.
Let's hope he becomes the wild card that we all know he is capable of becoming. I am going to pick a guy that I don't really know grinding tape-wise how well of a game he had, but Jack Cochran was asked one of the most difficult things an NFL player can be asked, which is not having a week of preparation. If it were this week against the Bills and they announced that Jack Cochran was going to be the starting middle linebacker, and he might, and that might be, Bolton and Tranquil might not be able to play, but he at least has a week of prep. He at least can sit down and mentally prepare for being the guy that's going to go in there and make all those calls and all the, be an NFL middle linebacker for the whole game. But instead, 7 snaps into this game, the second string middle linebacker goes down. And they go, all right, Jack, get out there and play the whole game, make all the calls, be the guy, be the green dot, go do it. I know you're not very experienced in the NFL. I know, he's not a very good player. If he was, he would be higher on the depth chart or would be starting for somewhere else. And that's not a knock on Jack. And, everybody's got to have, everybody has third string linebackers, everybody. Right. But to be asked to do that is commendable. It's commendable that he was out there and given it what he could, and I just felt that a wild card was appropriate here because I did want to shout him out. Not worthy of 5-star by any means, but he was capable of going out there and being thrust into a starting linebacker role that, frankly, probably the second hardest job to be asked to do on the fly without much preparation after quarterback. I mean, it's the defensive quarterback, it's the green dot. So shout out to Jack Cochran. I don't know how many more opportunities I'll have to name him as a award recipient, either positively or negatively on this show. So you are the wild card this week.
That's great. It was a recap that we recapped. I hope you guys like the new format. Let us know on Twitter/X or on our Discord, which you can always join by DMing Taylor on X, letting him know if you want to join us. But let us know how you like the MAC system, our new rubric for evaluating losses, and obviously the awards. Nobody's ever complained about those. They're good. We know they're good. So
solid.
We appreciate you listening to us rant and rave about that Packers loss. Let's talk about the game the Chiefs are playing this weekend on Sunday at Arrowhead against the Bills. So the Chiefs are 8-4. That's a good, respectable record. They're one off of the top seed in the AFC. The Buffalo Bills, despite their massive point differential, are 6-6. And, the Bills still have a path to the playoffs. That path will more or less require them to, with 6 wins and 5 games left to play, you got to think the bare minimum, they'd need to get to 10-7. The problem is, they don't have a tiebreaker on any of these teams, really. So they would need to have a better record than the 3 wildcard teams probably to get in. I'm not going to go through all the specific tiebreakers for each and every team, but like they probably need to get to 11 wins, which means they need to win out. And if they are going to get to 11 wins and win out, that means they have to beat the Chiefs. On the other hand, the Chiefs really want that number 1 seed. Patrick Mahomes was asked about it this week. The team is aware of it. And, to get it, the Chiefs are going to have to win out, and which means they also need this game. So for a team that's 6-6 and, record-wise is struggling, and a team that's 8-4 and record-wise is doing pretty well, this is a big game, a lot on the line, and who better to officiate a big game than legendary NFL referee Carl Chambers?
Jesus Christ!
He'll be the zebra on Sunday.
Information. Cool.
I'm telling you this for the first time. It's like the Trump meme. We'll play Tiny Dancer in the background. I had not heard that before. Yeah. You're telling me this for the first time.
Exactly.
Carl Jeffers is going to be the head referee for this game. And your response, Jesus Christ, I think speaks volumes. But I'm actually interested to see how this game plays out because, listen, up until the Super Bowl, I mean, we spent 20 minutes on the Super Bowl preview show talking about Carl Jeffers and all the times.
And then it worked out.
All the times he's fucked the Chiefs over the years, going all the way back to when Travis Kelce said he couldn't work at Foot Locker in the 2015 playoffs or whatever it was.
Right.
And his 8-year vendetta against the Chiefs. And then with the game on the line in Super Bowl 57, he calls James Bradbury, his crew, I should say, calls Bradbury holding. It effectively hands the Chiefs the win, lets them run down that clock to virtually nothing and kick the go-ahead field goal. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, the last time he was at Arrowhead was the infamous Chiefs-Raiders game last year, where he clearly was peeing his pants when he went up there to make the call on Chris Jones.
Time out, Raiders.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting. He then refereed the Texans game, which was in Houston, which was an abominably officiated game.
It was.
I mean,
overtime game.
Yes, and unbelievably one-sided against the Chiefs. But you know what? The last time we saw Carl, he ruled in our favor. It's going to be interesting to see what he does this weekend. He's a wild card.
He's always a wild card every time Carl's involved. And, we as Chiefs fans do not intimately know Carl's history with the Bills. I mean, certainly not off the top of our heads.
He might hate the Bills too.
Maybe he hates them. Maybe, the Bills have been fucked over by everybody that could fuck them over in history, basically. So, like, maybe Carl's part of that group.
Sure.
Them being 6-6 is annoying for a couple reasons, because if they sneak in and if they do somehow,
I know, right?
If they're sitting there at the 7 seed and the Chiefs are the 2, first playoff wildcard weekend is Bills at Chiefs. Yeah, I mean, that's as annoying as it can possibly get.
Yes,
right?
It is.
I mean,
it is.
So
absolutely, 100%.
So the Chiefs not only are jockeying for the 1, but they need to bury the Bills.
Sure.
They need to make sure that this team does not win this game and then vault themselves into the playoffs, because this team is definitely not going to continue to beat the Bills every year in the playoffs. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry.
No. They've already struggled against the Bills in the regular season, and
exactly. 13 seconds was basically a loss. You know what I mean?
It was 100%.
And over the since we started the podcast in 2020, the Chiefs have lost 15 games. And 3 are the Bengals and 2 are the Bills in that group. So 10 to everyone else.
I mean,
and then
13
Joe
seconds,
Burrow,
like you said.
It was basically another loss. So, the Bills already know how to beat the Chiefs. They already know how to beat them in Arrowhead. That would have been 3 Arrowhead losses. The Bills are the only team to win twice in Arrowhead in Patrick Mahomes' era. They're the only ones to come in there and do it twice. And so there's so much anxiety around just this, having to keep fighting the Bills off every single year and having to do this. That's what I think about when I think about this weekend, is not necessarily this game, which is big, but it's ensuring that there's not a bigger one down the road in January.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. And let's start with we usually start with the offensive side of the ball. Well, let's start with the defensive side of the ball here, because the Chiefs are third in overall DVOA, which is crazy, by the way. They're actually going up. They're actually improving despite the results
There's no other good
worse.
teams, really.
There
that's what it comes down to.
aren't any other good teams. That is completely true. I did put some money on Chiefs plus 650 to win the Super Bowl today, because I figured like 650. I mean, shit
for this team. For
the
defending champs.
Sign me up,
Mahomes.
bro. Chiefs are third overall in DVOA, and the Bills, despite their 6-6 record, are sixth. I mean, this is one of the best 500 teams you'll ever see this late in the season. But let's talk about the matchup on the defensive side of the ball against Josh Allen and these Bills. The Chiefs' defense is ninth in DVOA, and the Bills' offense is third. The Chiefs are at fourth, by the way. Spoiler alert. But the Bills are, they're right there. I mean, this is a top 3 offense. It obviously depends on what version of Josh Allen you're going to get. And the Chiefs have seen the full spectrum of Josh Allen. Yes. They completely dominated him in 2019 or 2020
on the way to the Bucs Super Bowl.
Right. In I think it was week 5 in a weird game that was played on.
The AFC Championship game when they also dominated him. I got you.
I was thinking
of a different
dominated him. They also dominated him in the AFC Championship game.
Yes.
But I mean, they beat him twice that year, and that was his breakout season. He got some MVP buzz that year. He was in the conversation. That was kind of his breakout year, and the Chiefs twice shut him down. Now, then the following season, he obviously beat the hell out of the Chiefs in Arrowhead, and then in 13 seconds game, played what many people consider to be the greatest performance by a quarterback in the history of the NFL. Exaggerating slightly, but only slightly. He was awesome. Very good in that game. I mean, people talk about his playoff run, which also included the game against the Patriots, where they literally were perfect, did not punt.
He threw 5 touchdowns on
every drive, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, I mean, this is a quarterback that the Chiefs have seen all the ranges of outcomes against, but have had probably more success than most. And, it's been a couple of weeks now without a turnover for the Chiefs defense. They had at least one, I think, in their first every game before the last 2. I think they had at least one turnover in every game. And now the last 2 weeks they have been without a turnover. Now they're going against the Bills offense that loves to turn the ball over. Got to take advantage of that.
They do. The Bills started the year off 3-1. And despite Billsing it up in the first game at the Jets, when they absolutely, Rodgers goes down, they should have dominated that game, lost to Zach Wilson, all that stuff. Then they ripped off 3 in a row, including beating a very, very good Dolphins team 48-20. And I just thought, all right, the Bills are going to be annoying. They're going to be the 1 or 2 or whatever. Just thought they were going to do what they've been doing. And they have gone 3-5 since their 3-1 start. And, losses to the Jags is no big deal. Loss to the Patriots who have set the
crazy.
NFL
they have
record.
2 wins.
Yeah, and the Patriots, they've beaten the Jets and the Bills, of course, because classic Patriots, even when they're shitty, they're still going to beat the AFC East teams. But the Patriots just lost 3 games in a row where their defense allowed 10 or fewer points. 3 games in a row has never happened before, or probably since the 40s or whatever, when everyone was winning 3-0. But the point is, these Bills, they lost then back-to-back games to the Bengals and Broncos, and then obviously just lost the Eagles heartbreaker, where the Bills had that game won also. They had a wide open Gabe Davis that Josh Allen and Davis weren't on the same page.
Couldn't connect.
Right. Would have been a walk-off, would have been an epic, Bills victory there against the defending NFC champs, but instead they lose the game. So they have been just so up and down and weird, but despite that, where do you think they rank in point differential in the NFL at 6-6?
Like 3rd, probably
5th,
behind like the 49ers and Cowboys.
But it's basically 3rd.
Sure.
I mean, they're right up there. They're
ahead of the Eagles.
101. They're ahead of the Eagles. The Chiefs are 6th at plus 67, so they're 34 points better over
that's crazy
over their 12 games than the Chiefs are, despite having 2 more losses. I mean, very, very, very Bills of them to just be as enigmatic and hard to predict and all that stuff. So all that's to say that when this Bills offense has the ball, they're either going to put up 40 or 15 or whatever.
I think that's true. I think that's right.
They're so Jekyll and Hyde that if they're on, I just see them being their normal on selves. But if the Chiefs can take advantage of it, I think it's going to be a long day for the Bills offense.
I agree. When the Chiefs have the ball, the Chiefs' offense is fourth in offensive DVOA, which is crazy. I mean, like
Yeah.
this is
It
like
is.
it is wild to think about. One of the things that's come out of this season, I'm not sure if it's positive or negative, is that like we're getting to see how the other half lives, and like this is what a merely extremely good NFL offense looks like.
Right.
It's
Nearly
like
top 5.
it looks to us looks terrible. It
Mhm.
looks like the worst offense we've ever seen
Because
it is the worst offense that we've seen
Yeah.
in the Patrick Mahomes era. Like
Yeah.
to us, this is inconceivably bad offense. To
The
everybody
fall
else,
to 4 has been hard.
it has been. And to everybody else, they're like, stop complaining. You guys just won the Super Bowl. You have Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and like
That's
it's
why
like, all
we're
right.
complaining.
Well, yeah, but like we got shut out in the second half of 3 straight games. Like,
Mhm.
we were one of the worst second half offenses in the NFL before
Drop
a
the
couple
ball
of
all
weeks
the
ago.
time. Yep.
We lead the league in drops.
Yep.
Again, this is just it's a frustrating situation. But they do have an opportunity here to, I think, break out. This Bills defense is currently 16th in defensive DVOA, but it's not even that good because that still includes games from earlier in the year where they had Matt Milano, they had Tremaine or no, not
Tre'Davious White.
I was thinking of Tremaine Edmonds, who
Yeah,
they lost in
yes.
free agency to
Yes,
the Bears.
exactly.
So I mean, like
Von Miller.
This team has lost a lot of talent. Von Miller is washed.
Yep.
I mean, Von Miller is having a terrible season. He's not doing anything when he's on the field.
Barely playing.
Exactly. He's effectively been benched quite a bit. He's also facing a domestic violence warrant for his arrest, which I've heard conflicting reports about, the evidence in that case, whether the victim may have recanted her accusations, which, by the way, does not mean that it didn't happen. It just means that the power dynamics and domestic violence relationships encourage that kind of behavior. I'm not saying that he did it either, obviously. Vaughn, don't sue. But, like, this is a weird situation with him because it's during the middle of the season. He has been charged with a crime, and they don't want to put him on the exempt list. I did have somebody tell me that they thought their conspiracy theory, if you will, was the Bills are telling the league not to put him on the exempt list because, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, they're not going to play him, but, like, they should want to get out of this contract. Like,
and they should want him on the exempt list because they can.
That would make it easier for them. Yeah. This conspiracy theory actually doesn't make any sense. It's the opposite.
Oh, weird. Wonder why.
The conspiracy is that they want him on the exempt list. They need to put him on the exempt list.
Yeah.
But the league is probably like, "Fuck you, Bills. You're stuck with this contract.
We're going to punish you by not punishing him.
Pay Von Miller $100 million. You reap what you sow." It's a weird situation. I mean, it sounds like he's going to play, even though he is currently facing. He's faced with a crime. I mean, Justin Ross was placed on the exempt list. Tyreek Hill would have been placed on the exempt list if it had taken place during the season. It was during the off season.
Yep.
So they didn't have to do it. They didn't have to put him on the exempt list, and the team suspended him.
Right.
Like wouldn't let him in the building the whole summer until the NFL made a decision. But this is wacky. It's just weird.
It is. And the Bills, they buoyed their start of the year as far as the numbers go. Like after that Jets lost by 6, they beat the Raiders by 28, 38-10. They only gave up 10 when their defense was healthy. Crazy. Then they went at the Commanders and won 37-3, won by 34.
Crazy.
And then beat the Dolphins 48-20. And then things started kind of falling apart in the Jags game when people started getting injured, including Milano. And that's kind of when things fell apart. But they were plus 90 over those 3 games against the Raiders, Commanders, and Dolphins. And then they're only 101 total. So they're only plus 11 in all their games other than those 3. So, they had early season moxie. They were healthy. They were, even despite the Jets loss, they were still throwing the ball over the yard and doing their offensive stuff. And then they kind of lost their mojo in London when they had to play that early game against the Jags, and they lost 25-20. They got injured in that game. Then following game, they had a 14-9 win over the Giants, where we all remember they were completely gifted that victory.
They got bailed.
The Giants had 0 points.
Hard carried by the refs.
Exactly, hard carried, and the Giants had 2 shots at the one and came up with 0 points total. Then, of course, they lost that game to the Patriots. They barely beat the Buccaneers. They scored a late touchdown in that game to win by 6, 24-18. drop the Bengals game, drop the Broncos game, beat the shit out of the Jets, who are a complete mess, and then they lost the Eagles. So they're as reeling as a team can be right now, especially given their Super Bowl trophy on their practice facility banner.
Sure.
And I mean, their expectations this year were absolutely to win the Super Bowl. So they're desperate. And I don't like teams that are desperate. I don't like it at all.
No, I don't like it either. I think the Chiefs need to approach this game like they're desperate, which frankly they should be at this point. I mean, I think that what needs to change is there needs to be the stink of desperation in the Chiefs locker room, and they need to get back to what makes them hungry and makes them want to win. And listen, I'm not questioning anybody's effort. If anything, I'm questioning the talent that some of the position groups on this team have. Looking at you, wide receivers, I think those guys want to be good. I think Sky Moore wants to be good. I don't think
Seems
Sky
like a
Moore
good kid.
wants. I don't think he wants to be the worst starting receiver in the NFL.
No.
But
here he is.
At some point, talent is a factor. But listen, the Chiefs have, on balance, this is probably a pretty close match in terms of the amount of talent as the teams currently stand. Now the Bills are facing. I mean, they have a couple of star players out. But it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. Chiefs really need this win. Hopefully, we'll be recapping a victory for you guys next week. So, Sunny Chiefs Kingdom.